Hi, it's Coach MK, and I have a question. Somebody's decided to write in to use their question from the nice list. So, Jacqueline, this one is for you. Hi, Coach MK. I'm using my coaching question. Not sure what to do. I went to see a PT to just get checked over to avoid injury. By the way, I'm 14 months postpartum and still nursing. Well, after going to the PT, I am now injured. I'm guessing that I was on the verge of something, and she had me run faster than easy effort while encouraging me to, I never am going, someday, I swear to you guys, I'm going to learn to remember to turn off the notifications on my phone before I start streaming. Today is not that day, obviously. So I'm guessing that I was on the verge of something, and she made me run it faster than easy effort while having me try to increase my cadence. That is what probably did it. So now my hips are all out of whack, mostly SI area. I'm going to see a DO, I'm guessing that's a doctor of osteopathy, who specializes in pregnant and postpartum women. He's good. I know I need to work on my hip and core strength, which I will continue to do. Now, what should I do about the running? Do I wait until I not have pain, go to see a PT to determine if my hips are strong enough to resume running? Is there anything I can do to maintain some of my cardiovascular fitness that I've built up? Thank you, Coach MK. Jackie. Okay, so there's a lot packed in here. I want to try to unpack it really slowly, but if you head over into the chat now, I'm putting a link in there to an article, a brilliant article. iRunFar.com is primarily an ultra running site. It's one of the best ultra running sites out there. I like them so much I support them to the tune of $15 per month on Patreon. If you've been paying attention to the news lately, you've seen a lot of really incredible feats performed by pregnant and postpartum ultra runners, notably the spine race, which is a something ridiculous like 268 kilometers, a 2-day race, where a woman was the winner. I mean, she beat all the women. I don't know. She beat every human that showed up, and she managed to breastfeed at every aid station. So I don't necessarily recommend this. I'm not saying like, I would never say like, you should do what she does, because that's the wrong way to look at it. The right way to look at it is like, let's look at what else she was doing. So it is possible to do things, amazing things, postpartum. The second part is, what's the probability? And I think this way because I used to work in reinsurance, and I promise you're going to see where I'm going with all this in a minute or two. But I used to work in reinsurance doing what were called nat cat bonds, natural catastrophe. So I would show up somewhere, calculate the probability of an event happening, and then what would the total collateral damage be in the worst case scenario, and then the minimum viable payments that needed to happen to prevent that scenario from utter destruction, right? And then what do you need immediately to get back on your feet after that destruction? So that's I'm telling you this. I tell you that to tell you this. This is how my mind works. This is still the way that I think. Okay, the way that goes through the human body. It would be wrong to point at the winner of the spine race and say, "Oh, I can do that too," because she's very high level ultra running. I get that that's not what you're saying, but I just don't want anyone else that is pregnant and where you are right now to say, but that didn't happen to her, so it wouldn't happen to me. And that's the wrong way to look at it. She's doing badass things, therefore I can too. That's the right way to look at it. But let's look at all the other things that person was doing too. So there's a lot that the first thing that I would do is check your pelvic floor, because what's going on with your SI joint when you're going really quickly, there's a lot of impact coming from a lot of really weak places. And any ultra runner or professional marathoner, notably, her name just went out my ear, Gwen Jorgensen. Gwen Jorgensen had a baby, and she would not start running at all until 7 weeks postpartum, only after her pelvic floor PT had cleared her. I did not start running again. I did not start really walking a whole lot until my pelvic floor PT had cleared me. Reason being, all that impact from running can undo progress in the pelvic floor area. So there's no hard and fast rule about first this, that, the other, but the way that I would strongly advise anyone to go about it would be start with the pelvic floor, rule that out. Don't assume it's fine, especially if this isn't your first baby. Number two, when your pelvic floor PT is like, this is strong enough and stable enough that you can get back to what you're doing, that's when we would then turn around and go back to, I'm thinking this first PT might not be the way to go. Maybe we could find another PT. Maybe this DO sounds really good to me. If he knows anything about strength or can point you in the direction of someone who does. Ask for a referral. It never hurts. Because here's what it comes down to, and this is really the conversation you should have had with your PT, and you don't mention it here, so I'm going to operate on the assumption that you didn't have it. Laxity matters. I'm still lax. Okay, my baby is now a year old. I am not breastfeeding, and I still have very loose, supple joints. Now, I was hypermobile to begin with, and there's a difference between the edge of glory, which turns into bad things really quickly. Remember, I dislocated my shoulder 3 weeks after the baby was born. That was partially due to hypermobility and mostly due to laxity in my tendons and my joints and my ligaments. So especially if you're still breastfeeding, then your body is still producing relaxin actively. So the chances of you still being fairly lax are high. The statistical probability there is like greater than 50%. The R squared is the R squared of that variable, I would assign at least like a 1. Right, so I would pay more attention to that, to the laxity factor, than anything else, because you can strengthen anything you do to strengthen those muscles could be doing more damage to your tendons, joints, and ligaments. So that's why we prioritize that first. If your ligaments and your joints are not strong enough to handle a load, then we don't ask them to do it, right? Because you can't. It's not like we only take care of the muscles. We need the joints and the tendons to work to just move the muscles at all, much less overload them in the way that we have to do to make them stronger. Make sense? So number one is like, how lax are you? Hopefully your PT told you. If your PT says your laxity for sure is gone and you're good to run, that is one conversation. If the PT didn't say that, then let's stop back up, go back to the pelvic floor, PT work there. Because all those forces, all those muscles inside can do a lot of damage to your lower back. And anything we do to get your SI joint back in order, it could pull it right back out. So you could be actively working against yourself by not seeing the pelvic floor PT first. So there you go. Number one, see the pelvic floor PT, rule that out. In the meantime, just walk. Walking is perfectly fine for cardio. And I know that sucks, and I know that's annoying, and I know that's not what you want to hear. Let me tell you, that's not what I wanted to do for 9.5 months this year, but I did it. And that's why I was able to pull off like almost an 11-minute mile with 145 heart rate with ice spikes on in the snow today. All right. And I've only really been back running, in all honesty, about 3 weeks. Okay. So the work don't need you to like it. The work just needs to get done. So your BATNA, your best alternative to anything, like in your worst case scenario, is you walk. And that's not a bad worst case scenario at all. So keep that in the forefront of your mind as we move forward. So number one, pelvic floor PT. Number two, rule out laxity. See where you are. If you're not lax, cool. But it sounds like you are. Because if your SI joint, it's not like an inherently unstable joint. So if it's still moving from impact forces, then you probably still have some laxity in there. If you were so weak that a little bit of running, even faster running, and I'm not talking like track intervals, I'm talking like just going out and trying to get a run done, that should not, one or two of those should not destroy your SI joint that way, or it shouldn't have you hips all out of whack the way you describe. So let's go back to somebody. If the DO can't do it, then let's find a PT who can, and maybe your pelvic floor PT would know someone good. So start there. So pelvic floor PT, and then use them to go back to a PT to check for laxity, number one, and then check for strength. And you need to be working with, and a good check for a PT. You know, I want someone, my best advice is someone with the OCS certification. And all you have to do is go Google OCS certification physical therapy. Okay, so someone with the OCS certification who is also certified for dry needling and manual therapy. Those guys will also have strength specialists in their clinic and probably a Pilates reformer. Okay, those are all good signs. If you ever walk into a PT office and you see a Pilates reformer, It doesn't mean everything's going to be okay, but that's a really good sign. I like to see that. Pilates that I do daily and I will be doing daily for life, it's not a lifestyle choice, it's rehab. I am going to be in rehab for the rest of my life. You don't have to be. But if we do a whole lot of rehab now, we might not have to later. So I tell you that again to emphasize that something like there are lots of ways to get stronger that will not throw your SI joint out of whack, and we need to find a PT that's going to help you strengthen those areas without the risk of further injury. Good example, a lot of the things that we do to strengthen your hips would require you to put a loop around your ankles or your knees and do things like side slides, monster walks, the whole loop series 1 that I assign people. Well, that is a real great way to trash your SI joint if you're still lax, right? So that's where the rub is. So that thing that we would do normally to make your hips stronger is going to make your SI joint pain worse, because if it's still lax, it's not ready to move independently with the force in that direction. Okay, makes sense? So that's why we really need to start this process with PT that's kind of cued in to what's going on with your SI joint. And being able to say I've completely ruled out pelvic floor PT is going to be a powerful thing, because I've got 2 injured people that I'm working with right now that I can direct you to that have stuff going on in their pelvic floor that has been holding them back. And every time we've taken a big step forward, their pelvic floor has pulled them back 2 steps. So it's hard. It's a struggle, and I volunteered to hold their hand every step of the way. But that's how I just want to reaffirm that there's not something wrong with you. That's how common it is, and I don't know why more people don't talk about it. It really annoys me. So yeah, want to make pelvic floor PT cool again, because any progress that we make in one area, if you were going to get re-injured the second you try to run faster, then I would argue we haven't actually fixed the problem. So pelvic floor PT, regular PT to rule out laxity, then a targeted strength series to work around your laxity and make you stronger while we wait for all of that to sort of come back together. I enjoy breastfeeding. I wish I really could have done it, by the way. It's like gift of the magi, right? The one time I lactate, it's finally on the 4th baby, and then I can't, then my shoulder pops out the day I pick her up, and my milk dries up because I couldn't even get you need 2 functioning hands to even get to hold the baby or to get the pump on, and I couldn't do it. So there you go. Anyway, you're getting to do something I never got to do. Enjoy it. Finally, I put a link in here back to what the original link about the irunfar.com. The reason this link matters is because whenever a PT says anything to you about cadence, I give it a big side eye. Cadence is one data point. 1. It's not something to be trained to, ever. And a PT worth his salt or her salt will agree with that statement, because form is a function of strength. Stride and cadence are biomechanical effects, right? A stronger person with stronger hips is going to have, generally speaking, a shorter stride, a quicker stride, a more efficient stride than someone who is unfit, just had a baby, and has laxity in their joints and weak hips. So we can work on cadence. They ain't going to do a damn thing. It's just going to make anything that hurts a whole lot worse, and it's going to have you doing something that's really unnatural and a whole lot more jarring, because if you're having to think about those teeny tiny steps, the chances are pretty good instead of a lighter, quicker step, it's actually going to be a harder step. And they talk about why in this article right here. So it's very long, but if you aren't ready to put cadence out of your head yet and be like, well, then how am I supposed to use it? This article lays it out step by step. And because we do have more research on running cadence and stride than just about any other running data point right now. And so that's why people like to talk about it, because there have been more studies commissioned on it. Therefore, medical professionals, people with science backgrounds, feel more confident speaking about it because we have more research. But there's one big problem, and it's one that if you read my Nuzzle newsletter, you would have seen, we discussed it last week. The big problem with cadence and stride pods is that what it's measuring doesn't account for how much your foot might be slipping inside your shoe. And that's been a big weakness for a long time, and it's the main reason I don't pay any attention to cadence. It's one number I kind of look at as a trend over time, but it's not one I look at in any specific workout. So the way that I used cadence for me was I went for my first run after I had a baby and was like, whoa, my cadence was kind of all over the place. And then as I've gotten stronger and fitter, it's gotten a lot more consistent. And it's not something I'm working to or thinking about. It's just something I'm noticing because it's a reinforcement that makes me feel good. Like, oh yeah, there we go. I'm steady as a clock again. That's a good sign. Okay. So anyone that puts that much emphasis on a variable like cadence, not saying they're totally, I would question them on that. I would question their judgment. And I would push back pretty hard on it. So not saying fire that person, but I would have reservations about going back if I were you. I have mentioned in previous podcasts, Google any of the podcasts I did with Alex Lanton. He's my physical therapist. I've been worked with him closely for 5 years. He is the best physical therapist I have ever worked with, hands down. And he's never watched me run. He's treated me effectively and he's never watched me run. I think maybe one time he came to the track and would have seen me do a loop back in 2015, but that's it. He's never put me on a treadmill to do a gait analysis. We've never talked about cadence. He's never asked me about cadence. He feels the same way that I do about it, and that was a happy accident. Because I remember saying to him, like, as a type B personality that doesn't care about things other people care about, I have to check myself once in a while. And I'll be like, okay, Alex, everyone's talking about this again. Am I looking at it wrong? Do I need to start worrying? And he's like, no. So cadence is not something you can or should worry about. Notice it if it makes you feel good. Like, ooh, it's getting tighter. It's getting smaller. That means I'm getting stronger. Great. Anything for positive reinforcement while we're on the way back. But as something to train to, all of my workouts still are either intensity capped, heart rate capped, or pace driven, trying to hit a pace target. So, and you right now probably aren't in a place to do either one. So before we even worry about the running, we got to make sure that your chassis is strong enough to handle everything that you want to do. Because trying to get there sooner only works better 3 days off now than 3 weeks off 3 days from now. So you're going to hear me say that a whole lot, especially to myself as I work on my journey coming back, getting ready for the New York Marathon later this year. But it sucks and it's hard. And I've got the podcast, The Morning Mantra with Coach MK on iTunes. And I can, if you want a mantra for it, I'm happy to give you one. I'm just sort of like, how do I deal with this walk every day? And I can give you all the tips and tricks that I use to get my ass out the door to walk around the neighborhood with one good arm, pushing the last baby that's ever going to come out of my body that I couldn't breastfeed. So, but, I made myself do that even though I didn't want to. And before I knew it, I was walking 30 miles a week. So that's a huge time suck, and I get that not everyone has that kind of time, but whatever sort of time you had to train before, that isn't totally going to be eaten up by rehab and strengthening exercises now. Just do what you can and don't worry about it. Anything is better than nothing. It really, really is. Like, does 20 minutes matter? Yes. Does this really add up? Yes, I promise you that. Otherwise, I would not have been doing it. Because let me tell you how 8 hours a week of Pilates felt like fucking nothing when I was pregnant. It felt like fucking nothing now. But I've got a stronger core than I've ever had in my life. I can lift up out of a seat on my tiptoes on one leg from my leg's at a 90-degree angle. Try that. Sit at a 90-degree angle, press your heel off the floor, and try to get up out of the seat. I can do that on both feet. I am stronger and more solid than I have ever been. And it happened slowly because I kept consistently showing up to do that work little by little. So when the time came that I hired a coach and said, I think I'm ready to start running again, turns out I'm way stronger than I thought I was. And I'm way better off than I thought I was. So doing the ugly work now that you don't want to do is going to pay off in spades. But let's first rule out anything going on in your pelvic floor that could be contributing to your SI dilemma. Let's find a good PT, probably not the same PT you saw before. Let's find a different PT that will work with you to judge your laxity and work with you on a targeted strength plan to work around your laxity while we make you stronger. And as for what do you do about that, you should definitely wait until you don't have pain to run. But what you can do is anything that doesn't hurt. So focus on what you can do, meet your body where it's at, and just do the work. And I promise when it all comes back together, it'll be like, what the hell just happened? I ran 27.5 miles last week. I haven't done that since early 2017. It's 2019. It doesn't sound like that long ago, but that's a long damn time ago. So that would have been back in May. 27 miles is like a taper week for me. So yeah, that would have been like May 2017. So almost 20 months ago. 20 months ago. So I finally, after 20 months, had a week that looked somewhat respectable to me. 20 months is a long damn time. But I tell you what, to be pain-free now and injury-free now and like looking forward to my run tomorrow, it was worth every day. And I will be with you every step of this, every step of the way and every step of this process. All you have to do is reach out. So that is what I would do. And don't worry so much about the cardiovascular fitness. As long as you are moving and you are on your feet for specified time blocks, 20 minutes is plenty, 30 to 60 is optimal. Then do what you can, focus on what you can do, and don't worry about the rest. Get that plan, get the strength done, work around the laxity because that is a big limiting factor and there's very little you can do to control it other than stop breastfeeding sooner, which I would never tell you to do and I don't think you do. So with that in mind, know that you're coached and you're loved and you're winning at life. Go enjoy that baby. Breastfeed as long as you want to. The running will be there as long as you don't force your body into something that it is neither ready nor strong enough to do and do permanent damage. Okay? Sooner is not necessarily better. Patience is going to be the name of the game. And remember, we're playing a very, very, very long game here. Okay? You're coached, you're loved. Let's go win it Tuesday.